Hi, everyone. If you've signed up for Healing the Hustle, Overcoming Burnout with Self-Compassion, you are here with Dr. Ben Weinstein and myself, Sabrina. So you see our pictures and you see us live here. We move. And we do have upcoming events. So, I think it's December now, and I think we have about 3 weeks left. So we do have an event coming up not next week, but Wednesday, at 8 to 9:30 p.m. Singapore time. So you can join us after work if you are in Asia, or you can join us in the middle of your workday or during lunch if you're elsewhere. So yeah, feel free to join us at Calm Circles on Wednesday. That's our peer support group where we will be reflecting on the year. So you can find information about that on our website, calmcollective.asia. And I think just to introduce ourselves and where we are. Hi, I'm Sabrina. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Calm Collective. I understand we have folks joining in from Facebook and also on LinkedIn. So we also have Ben here on screen joining us. So Ben, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. My name's Ben. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm also a teacher of mindful self-compassion, which is a program I'm very pleased and proud to be a certified teacher of. And I'm speaking to you today from smack dab in the center of downtown Bangkok.
I think Ben is several streets away from me, so I'm also in Bangkok right now. And the weather's really great. The weather's really nice today in the morning. It was really cool.
And
Yeah,
breathable.
very
Relative.
breathable today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So,
went running first thing. I went running in the park first thing.
what time were you there, Ben?
Between 5:30 and 6:20.
Yeah, I was asleep, but I got there.
It's relevant to our webinar today because I got back into the rhythm of running, right, after a couple of years of not, but we'll get there, right?
We will get there, and I was at the same park at 7:30 today.
Okay. So a more
Yeah.
humane or a lot of self-compassion there, Sabrina.
I think this is also relevant to our conversation today, right? Just knowing our own pace
Right.
and like body clocks and all of that. So yeah, and I think it's always a good time speaking with Ben. And I think the challenge here is that we may go all over the place and forget to talk about burnout. So I'm just gonna get us back on track.
We're supposed to talk
And
about burnout?
oh, yeah. So, oh man, okay. So, well, I have the plan, or yeah, well, the agenda of our session for today, and we called it Healing the Hustle because I think in a very fast-paced modern life, especially with us living in cities, it's very easy for us to get swept away by the hustle, right? Just to keep doing, whether it's doing a lot of work, taking on new projects, busying ourselves with all sorts of activities, socials, especially during the festive season, or even 101 errands that we have to do, right? I haven't cut my hair in like months, and I really need to do that. But I've let it go. So it's
I was
really
going to
hard.
say something, Sabrina, but I thought
Yeah.
really not appropriate. So I'm glad you mentioned it.
Okay. Yes, Ben. So we have a private chat, Ben, so you can always talk to us in the back.
Sorry, was I supposed to
All
mention
good.
that?
So,
All right.
so about burnout, right? So it's just like really easy to get swept away with everything. And I think, the inspiration for this chat today was really from a conversation that I had with Ben several months ago. I think this was in September, if I'm not wrong. And we were just, meeting nearby, having some udon, and we are just catching up with each other. And I was just sharing with Ben that, like, July and August were really hard because I found myself completely burnt out. I was just super busy with doing many things that I didn't have much time to rest. And all of that just caught up with me in the month of July, where I found myself completely unable to work. I was, yeah, it just felt like my whole brain and body just shut down, and I needed to, I guess, repair my whole body and mind. Um, and in September, when we had met, I was just coming out of that recovery season. Um, and Ben was just very great at holding space and listening. And that was also when Ben said, "You know what, Sabrina? I've also been there. I've experienced burnout too." And I think from that conversation, I realized that for each of us, there are many different factors that can lead to burnout, and burnout can also look very different for each person. And the way in which we recover also will look very different depending on our own needs and our own preferences, right? So, yeah, that kind of led us to realizing that we need to talk about burnout because first and foremost, it's something that's not talked about enough. I think in the mental health conversation, as part of Calm Collective, we see that a lot of the conversations have been very much, very, very tame, actually. Like, what is mental health? What is stress? Or it can go to the other end of like, let's stop suicide, right? But burnout is just not really talked about. And what I reflected on was that when I experienced that burnout, and I was juggling so many client projects. I was obviously taking care of the team. I was also traveling and trying to be a good daughter, friend, all of that, right? I just broke down. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it all. And I struggled a lot in, I struggled a lot with sharing that I was struggling and that I needed help. In fact, like I didn't recognize inside of me that I needed help, right? Before it was kind of late, when I was already like, oh, I can't do anything. I was just flat, right? And I was still struggling and pushing against that. So I think it's really this shame and the stigma around it that we want to unpack. And also just to reflect on our own experiences of burnout. Obviously, we want to hear from you as well. We can see comments. Um, so yeah, we have quite a bit of time here. But maybe, yeah, Ben, what do you have
Yep.
initial
Well, that
thought to
was.
share?
I'm glad. It's. I'm glad you remember that conversation because I think that that was the point that really struck both of us. Again,
Mm.
there's something really interesting about the kind of pathways and how we didn't realize it and when we did realize it, and that's a story I think we need to go into. But what and but probably most importantly, this idea that both of us felt a bit of stigma, right? That it's been difficult. It's for me, it still feels difficult to talk about this in public, and that we really need to, that both of us, in terms of asking for help and in terms of like acknowledging this and being able to say this, yeah, this happened to me too. Um, and of course, Calm Collective's mission is about reducing stigma and removing stigma. I think that that was what resonated for both of us, that this is a really important conversation to be able to say, hey, this is happening. It's happening to a lot of us. And what's stopping us from talking about that?
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. It's a very hard conversation, and I think it took a lot of courage from both sides to like, okay, you know what, let's do this. And now that we're talking about it, Ben, no turning back. Everyone will know. So, and I think we're okay with it.
Yes.
um, yeah, and it helps to do it with someone else. So I guess wait. Oh, Ben. So you know what? I just want to like, for the audience and for anyone who's new or still trying to understand this topic of burnout, right? Can we start from just understanding what burnout is? Because I think, yeah, that word's being thrown around a lot, but what does it really mean?
Right. Yeah. And this is really interesting because at least, and it depends whose system you use. I'm a clinical psychologist, so I have to learn this massive encyclopedia of diagnoses, and it shapes my whole way of looking at the world and conversations that I have with people. So technically, at least until recently, there wasn't even a diagnosis of burnout. And in North America, there still isn't, right? But the WHO, the World Health Organization, has come up with a definition of burnout that's being widely used in Europe. And many of us who are in North America and other places are using their definition, since the Psychiatric Association and Psychological Associations of North America haven't really taken on this issue. And the WHO basically says that to get to be considered burned out, there's 3 criteria that characterize burnout as far as they're concerned. And they are: number one, a state of depletion or exhaustion, right? Exactly what you were talking about, Sabrina, when you said that you just felt your in body and mind, you were done. And I think everyone who's been near burnout or gotten into burnout is very familiar with this sense of depletion. The second criteria is, depending on how you look at it, it's a sense of mental distance from your work or from your project or your volunteering or whatever it is you're burnt out on. It's having a sense of mental distance. And this can take a number of different forms, including feeling less motivated, beginning to feel detached, not caring anymore, to developing a cynical sense about your work, or even a sense of bitterness and disappointment in your work. So either all under the umbrella of kind of increasing mental distance from whatever it is that you're doing. So it doesn't have to be just work. It could be volunteering that gets a person burned out. We typically speak about work, but it can be more than that. And then finally, as a result of the depletion and exhaustion, as a result of this increasing mental distance or cynicism, you end up with reduced professional effectiveness. That's the WHO's third criteria, is that we're just not doing our jobs well anymore. And I really remember this feeling in my life from late 2021 and 2022 when I went through burnout, and really in a way that I hadn't ever done professionally, like beginning to feel like I wasn't bringing myself into my work in a way that I could recognize. And that really felt like that really began to undermine my self-confidence. So
Yeah.
that's the WHO's definition. And then of course there's a whole bunch of different risk factors in jobs as well that can lead people into a state. But remembering that it's really not a binary state. It's not you're either in burnout or not in burnout, right? It's very much, as my experience was, and I suspect your experience was, Sabrina, it's something that creeps up on you gradually. Something that creeps up
Yeah.
on you gradually. Mm.
Yeah, it does. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about was, I think it feels like burnout seems to be like cumulative stress. And another way I've thought about it was that burnout is a state of doing too much for too long, in a way. How would you describe the difference between burnout and stress, just to understand it better?
You know, stress is a natural part of the way we react to the environment. And stress is a transaction between us and the environment, because, in the sense, why do I say it's a transaction? Because an event that one person finds stressful, another person might not, right? So there is something that goes on that involves the individual experiencing the stress. And of course, in this context, I'm not speaking about traumatic stress. I'm speaking about the stresses of daily life that we might all experience in the course of our routines at family, with friends, or at work. Um, so that we have different reactions, because there's both a burden, a demand coming in from the outside that activates us. We may feel challenged. We might feel overwhelmed, depending on how we're processing that demand. Because it turns out one of the key factors is our perception of control. Do we feel like we have a sense of control over what's happening? Therefore, jobs that tend to give people less control, or managers who tend to give people less control, tend to be more stressful. Also, do we have a sense of purpose in what we're doing? Things that we feel have purpose and meaning tend to be a bit less stressful for us. Nonetheless, so stress is this kind of reaction that we have to things that happen in daily life. We're not imagining stress. Stress is a physiological and neurological reaction that manifests cognitively, emotionally, behaviorally, socially. Burnout, as you just put it, is the cumulative effect of this stress burden when it has been unremitting, when it has been consistently with us over a period of time and we have not had a chance to recharge ourselves. So we've been under this excessive demand. We've been under this excessive demand in a way that has worn down our reservoir of resources. So stress is this very normal kind of reaction, set of reactions that we can all have and that we all do have. And many psychologists, many professionals talk about positive stress, that when we feel challenged, um, when we feel engaged with something that's challenging, that's really good for us.
Yeah.
There's no amount of burnout that's good for us.
So stress can be good and burnout is not. Full stop. That's kind of like I was like, let
Thank
me
you.
process this.
That's what I meant to say, but it came out that other way.
Yeah, no, it helped. I just was processing it. I'm a little
Yeah,
bit tired today,
he
so
wrote
I
a
just came
columnist.
back
He said
from.
he wrote like stress is like a system and burnout is the consequence of it.
That's a
Um,
really good one, yeah.
mhm.
Is it?
Thanks, Lloyd.
Is it? Yeah. No, thank you so much.
But I don't want to frame stress as a symptom because stress is a normal
Hmm,
part of life as we live it, especially if
yeah,
we're doing a lot of interesting things.
yeah. No, I find that with stress, it can be really helpful. For example, um, I have ADHD, so I tend to do things kind of last minute, and that stress kicks me into action, right? I'm like, yeah. So it helps give me a lot of motivation sometimes. But I also have reflected on this and I've recognized that it's not a good state to be in for too long. So, like, I can do that once in a while, right? But if I'm operating like that for 3 months, I'm definitely going to be burnt out at some point. So, yeah, Ben, thanks for sharing a bit more about the difference between stress and burnout. I think that was really important because I think the word stress tends to get a lot of flack as well, right? Like, oh, you're stressed? No, don't be stressed. No, stress is all right. um,
Well, stress is a part of life. Stress itself is a part of life, and hopefully what we've got are good ways of responding to it, taking care of it, coping with it. Stress in and of itself, and stress is very much because there's demand, which is when the things that have to happen, like the exam we have to take, the projects we have to complete, the errands we have to run, that's demand. Stress is the way we're processing that,
yeah,
right?
and I
This
think it
this
gets,
was the
yeah.
real difference. I'll give you, because the way that I was processing stress once I got into burnout was way different than the way that I
Mm,
processed stress before I got into burnout. Does that resonate for you? Right? The way I would
yes,
respond to challenges.
yeah,
Because I one of the ways in which burnout manifested for me was that I felt much more easily overwhelmed in a way that was almost um, unrecognizable to me.
yeah, Ben, maybe, you know what? I would love to hear more about what burnout felt like for you. Like, what were the, I guess, symptoms of burnout, if that's the right way to
Sure.
frame it.
Would it be good to run through because since my list, and I suspect no one's individual list will correspond to the full list, should we run through the kind of general list first so people can kind
Yeah,
of do their own
yeah,
self-assessment?
yeah,
Yeah, because I think that again the I've mentioned the three core things, but those represent a kind of end state. You're in burnout. So what are the and I think I'd separate things between early warning signs based on my own experience and uh, red flags, like what I would consider signs of incipient burnout. Um, and I think those are when you're feeling exhausted, and consistently exhausted, like just having a good weekend sleep doesn't reduce that. When you really feel a loss of meaning in what you're doing, like things you used to care about just feel like uh, overwhelming. Um, the whole Sunday night syndrome. I don't know if you've ever like the Sunday night syndrome, the feeling of like dreading going to work. And I've also worked with many clients dealing with burnout in one form or another, because I work with a lot of folks who are humanitarians and development workers, and those are industries where people experience a lot of burnout. and this sense of like unable to go into work, breaking down on Sunday night or Monday morning and unable to go into work, um, avoiding work. I think these are kind of red flags, and I'll talk about how those manifested for me. I think the early warning signs, uh, when you're not quite there yet, are going to look like a lot of early warning signs you always hear about, like having trouble sleeping, feeling irritable or easily annoyed with work or with people in general. Your performance has started to go down. You've started to develop some distance from the work, like your motivation isn't the same as it used to be. Um, but it's still there. So you may have started, your attitude about work has maybe just started to shift. Maybe you feel a little bit surprised by that. For many people, it will take the form of physical symptoms like headaches or stomach aches, or other ways of processing that. Um, uh, there can be emotional changes, anxiety and tension can go up, sadness can go up. And of course, overall, you get noticing changes in motivation. So I think those are the generic kind of red flags and early warning signs. For me, uh, I think, I think what happened for me was, uh, it was, it was a combination of factors, I guess, which we can get into a little bit later.
Yeah.
But, around the end of 2021, I just realized, probably in December 2021, January 2022, I realized like I was tired all the time in a way that wasn't familiar to me. And I was constantly like sleeping during the day. Um, uh, and even though I had spaces in my schedule, I stopped accepting new clients. And that was, um, and I, I not only, and this is a little bit difficult to describe because I'm a therapist, the way I make my living is by doing therapy in addition to doing trainings and stuff. But the I was very aware that I didn't have space. This is how therapists talking about this, because it's one of these characteristics that we develop over the course of our training and our practice. We listen to a lot of people, and we're able to make space, which means that we can allow someone else to have their experience and kind of stay reasonably calm and present while someone else is sharing their trauma, their grief, their heartbreak, their suicidal thinking, whatever it is, right? So that we're able to be there and be reasonably calm, right? We call that making space for people. And I realized I had no more space. And that was really unfamiliar. I'd never experienced anything like that. And so I would feel, like I don't want to listen anymore. And I would also feel exhausted at the end of sessions. Like it had taken much more effort than I was familiar with. I mentioned before, I felt really easily overwhelmed by things that did not overwhelm me in the past. And it even culminated when, uh, I distinctly remember this. My wife and I were on the way to the airport. This must have been in early 2022 or late 2021. We were in the way to the airport, and we were stuck in traffic in a taxi, and I had a panic attack. And there's, I've never had a panic attack in my life prior to that moment. But I got so overwhelmed. I would ordinarily get tense. Like before I had burnout, I would have gotten tense and been uptight and maybe fretted a little bit, worried out loud, or annoyed my wife by talking about, will we make it to the airport in time? I had a full on panic attack in the taxi. Like my heart was pounding. I wanted to get out of the taxi. I wanted to go home. I couldn't, like, and I realized pretty quickly in that case what was happening. But that was
Mm.
also like a bit of a wake up call. And I developed a really negative attitude. Those, I think, were those and a few other things. How about for you, Sabrina? What were the
Yeah.
I
No,
saw
I
that.
remember, but then I was like, oh man. No, firstly, like, yeah, no, no, we didn't go into detail the last time we talked about this. So, I'm keen to also hear from you then, like, yeah, what your even more like about what your experience was like. I didn't know about the panic attack. And, unfortunately, I'm also all too familiar with those panic attacks, which I actually have not talked about before to anyone outside of my, close circle of friends. And yeah, and also I wanted to just say thank you for sharing, because that's not something that's easy to talk about or to admit. And I mean, for me, I don't know about you, Ben, but like for me, being in the mental health space, right, and leading Calm Collective, I gave myself like an extra beating in my mind, right? I was like, oh, Sabrina, you should have known better, because you tell people about these things and you tell people to rest. And yet there I was, experiencing just overwhelming anxiety, panic attacks, not wanting to get out of bed to work, even though in a better state. It would have been easy to do, right? Like a small thing. Um, yeah, Ben, and like, yeah, thanks for sharing about your experience going to the airport. I have also kind of like panicked as I arrived to the airport. And I was like, and for me, instead of, wanting to leave the car, because that's a separate, anxiety thing that I've faced before. But in burnout, I've actually, so for me, it's been very different. Um, how I've experienced it is, I think my early warning signs usually come up physically. So I would find like, oh, my chest starts tightening up. I have trouble breathing when I feel like a bit overwhelmed. Or I might have like digestive issues. I can't really eat, or I can't really like swallow food, because I'm like, oh, I can't, I'm just so tired. My energy needs to go elsewhere and do other things. Um, Other early warning signs would definitely be, it would come up emotionally. So, I also deal with bipolar disorder. So my mood will be a bit all over the place, either very irritable. So if like a small mistake happens by either myself or someone else, I'm like, grr, when usually I'd be a lot more patient. But, I'm very unforgiving when I am close to burnout. And then, yeah, sadly, I'll also make the people that who are closest to me like really upset, because I'll vent at like with them at them. Yeah, it's not great. So my emotions and my mood get a bit, I guess, off balance. Um, and I guess, finally when we hit the red flags, it's really that whole, like classic burnout, like completely depleted from an energy standpoint. I'm just very cynical about work. What else? I just cannot really work. So when I found myself in burnout in July, I was struggling to do like the most basic of tasks, and Ben, how you talked about how purpose helps us with overcoming stress or navigating stress. Being able to work, to being able to do the work that we do through Calm Collective, whether it's in the community or with the corporates, helping people have a greater sense of well-being, having people understand mental health more and all of that. That usually gives me a lot of purpose. But when I was in burnout, I was like, what is all of this for? It's not going to help anyone. You're like, all of that comes in. And it's just like, oh my goodness. Now looking back, I'm like, no, Sabrina, like, you were just burnt out, right? But in that state, I was like, I just have to, honestly, in July, I was talking to a few people and I was like, you know what? I want to quit. I'm done. No more Calm Collective. I'm done. I was so ready to like forget all of this, and it's hard for me to admit this. But then, what I realized was that I just needed to rest. And rest I did. But we will talk about that in a bit. And, for those listening in, I'd love to hear also from you what your own early warning signs look like. right? And if you're comfortable, feel free to share the red flags or anything about your own burnout experiences as well. So,
Yeah, thanks
yeah.
so much, Sabrina, for sharing that. And that, I mean, that's really you describe so vividly that shift, that psychological shift, that can be such a signature of burnout from something that feels meaningful to futility. Right? There's a way in which the way that mental health professionals frequently look at it is the symptoms or the signs of burnout tend to mimic the signs of depression, but but they're not exactly the same. And it's because what matters is how people got in there. And just let me say how glad I am on behalf of everyone who's tuning in, and on behalf of all the people who've benefited from the amazing things that Calm Collective has done over these years for people in the community. Thank you for giving yourself permission to rest, and for your courage
Mm,
throughout all these years to share and to be open and to be a leader in showing people, and an inspiration to me as well about being willing to talk about these things, because it can be really difficult to talk about.
yeah. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for recognizing that. I think yeah, it was really hard. And I think, one of the things that really helped me was just having because I've been in burnout before, I've had depression, and thankfully I've developed my own support system around me to kind of just be that mirror to say, like, hey, Sabrina, wait a minute. You just need to rest. You've clearly been doing a bit too much. Maybe this is burnout. Maybe this will pass. Don't make any rash decisions.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm just very thankful that, with this whole mental health journey of, like, I don't know, close to a decade now or more, um, I was able to, like, turn to yeah, like, the various therapists that even Alyssa, my co-founder, and Cloris, who's our stage manager of the day. They were really great at holding space for me because they had that space, and also to say, like, you know what, while you go on break, we'll just hold for it, even though it's not the same without you. It'll be fine, right? So I think having that confidence to take that break was very, very helpful. uh, yeah. So I mean, I guess moving our conversation forward, and we started getting questions as well, but we'll get to that maybe a bit later. I want to hear from you, Ben, a bit more about your burnout and how you started picking yourself up. Like, how did you listen to those signs of burnout, and what did you do to, yeah, overcome it? I guess, yeah.
Yeah, because I okay. Yeah, because I think I slipped into it over the course of something like 12 months. But we were all going through COVID, right? We were all dealing with various stresses, and I think that and the the most common pathways into burnout are, as you mentioned earlier, through overwork, or through some combination of overwork and some kind of dysfunctionality, or in rare cases, toxicity in the workplace. Dysfunctionality is much more common, of having a poorly trained boss who doesn't know how not to micromanage, or having poor communication in the workplace, or unclear expectations, or psychologically unsafe environments, um, situations where people don't have a sufficient degree of control or choice over aspects of their work, or lack of support. You know, I I can't. I'm self-employed. I am my own boss, right? And it's really difficult. Like, I can control, and I've always exercised that control. Somehow during COVID, I lost that. I lost that sense of it. Doing a lot of webinars, and there was a lot of demands. Um, and in my case, there was an additional issue, and this has really made me appreciate the sense of burden that leads to burnout. Because for me, I had an injury early in COVID as a result of spending too much screen time, as a result of spending too much time doing online sessions, and my ergonomics weren't good. I developed a really severe issue with my neck. The first orthopedist I saw told me it was going to be a lifelong issue. it just turns out, thank heavens, not to be the case. But developed a significant issue with my neck and debilitating pain. Um, and at the same time, like many people, and so I had to stop exercising. And exercising, I mean, I have established self-care routines that I feel are obligations of mine as a caregiver in order to have space, and things like meditating, participating in a spiritual community, exercise. These are like the main ways that I engage. And during COVID, early in COVID, it all went away. In terms of being able to do so many of those things, I lost the concentration to meditate. Spiritual community stopped meeting. First time in 10 years I did that. And for the first time in more than 15 years, I wasn't exercising almost every day. And that led into this progressive slide of ending up in the condition I described a few minutes ago. Oh, and there was another factor that's, again, a little bit personal. And I think both of us, Sabrina, should really feel free to regulate what we share. But in approaching today, I decided I really wanted to be open about this, because I'm actually a really private person, and it's kind of difficult for me to be open in this way. But I was talking with some friends, and we all decided that that would be okay, because I've it it has to do with how we're trained as therapists and what we disclose. But anyway, that's all by way of saying, like many couples over COVID, my wife and I weren't getting along, and that hit me very, very hard. That took a big emotional toll. So all of this, um, all of this really started to affect me. And as I said, by early 2022, when other people were coming out of COVID, I was in a state of burnout. And after that panic attack that I mentioned earlier, I realized I knew something was not okay, but I was like, nope, now something's got to happen. Something's got to give. So the first thing I did, and I think this was kind of the turning point for me, but this is not available for most people, but this is what I did. Um, I took 3 months off, right? I knew I needed to do something really radical. I think you knew about this. I told you at the time. I didn't say why. I took 3 months off, right?
Yeah.
Actually, there was 2 weeks in the middle when I did meet with clients. And I told my clients, I plan to do this. I can't, as a caregiver, I can't just do that, right? So I actually told my clients 4 or 5 months ahead of time
Yeah.
that I'd be taking June, July, and August of 2022 off, where I would ordinarily be on vacation for about 4 weeks of those 3 months. Um, and then another thing that I did, and I'm so glad that I did this, because I went on a silent meditation retreat in May of
Yeah.
2022. And that was really a really crucial and important step
Mm.
in getting the process going, in and because it gave me a lot of space. I went to Deep Abavan in Koh Samui, the meditation center, um,
Mm.
where you can do a 7-day silent retreat, which was fabulous. I mean, silence is, for me, that's something very, very nourishing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and that was the start. How about, and there were some other things, but I'd love to hear from you. Like, where did you begin? Where did you
Oh
put a
wow.
stake in the ground and say, like, okay, let me.
Uh, I feel like I think it's really, huh. I have so many questions and so many thoughts actually. So I'm trying to pick which trailhead to go. Um, I, firstly, okay. So Ben, you said you had 3 months of rest, right? But it was kind of like a year as well. 3 months, but also a year ish.
Right. I mean, I had been into serious burnout for probably. I mean, I realized in around December, January, and it continued to be pretty bad up until May. And I was kind of limping along.
Mm.
And I think that I had already been there for 6 months or for five
Mm.
months since about July or August of 2021,
Mm.
before I kind of suddenly, I think there was a degree of denial there as well.
Oh,
I was kind
yeah.
of limping along, saying, "Well, everybody's dealing with this, right?"
Mm, mm.
Um, so
And then the
yeah,
moment that you took your break, that was it you had three
uh,
months or?
yeah, it was 10 out of the 12 weeks. Um,
Okay. Yeah. And then you went back straight to work, or
yes,
how did that go?
then I went back to
Oh,
work.
okay.
But I also, again, I used that as time. I mean, again, I started exercising again, right? By then, the pain issue had been dealt with. Because there was a period of time during COVID, starting in May 2021, when I had to go to physical therapy twice a week, and I had to go get acupuncture once a week. So I was running around trying to like manage my pain. Anyone who's had pain knows how this is, and pain was a big element of what led into my burnout. It really wore me down, as I think pain
Mm,
does.
yeah. Oh man.
Um,
Okay.
it
Yeah.
restricted me, right? And again, it gave me the sense of I'm not in control,
Yes.
right? I
Yeah.
had to
So
modify.
yeah, it seems like it was that start. I mean, the thing that kind of started going you in, started moving you into that path towards burnout was that sense of not having control, and then you just kind of like limped along with it, and then
Yes.
yeah,
I did exactly what a lot of my clients do, is that the warning signs are there and I just blew through them.
yeah, yeah. As you're sharing that, I was also kind of reflecting on, yeah. I mean, I think limping along for quite a while before everything just you're really burnt out. That's a really great way to describe it. Um, and also that it's just really great to be able to carve out that 3 months of
Right.
rest. And I know that in some companies, there are some companies that allow that mental health sabbatical. I believe, like, you can take a month off or 3 months off, paid or unpaid, right? Depending on the company's policy. And I think one of the questions that a lot of people always ask themselves is like, "Oh, I can take a sabbatical," or they might say, "Oh, I'm so burnt out. I know I need a break, but what shall I do with myself during that break, and how much time do I need?"
Right.
Right? And I'm curious to know if you have any like, what would your advice be? I mean, I have my own experiences, my own thoughts, but I'm curious to know from your perspective, because I'm sure, Ben, you've seen more than a few people going through this cycle. Wait, do you have any tips to share?
It's really, you know, tip number one, I think, is don't ignore warning signs. Don't blow through the warning signs. Especially, I acknowledge I have so much privilege and an unusual degree of this privilege and this luxury of being able to control my schedule. Although again, I had a lot of resistance to it. It took a lot to get me to the point where I was like, oh man, I'm not okay. And I'm not able to do my job at the level that I'm satisfied with. So I need to do a reset, because I was already into a state of significant burnout. I met the three criteria of the WHO. So if you have early warning signs, it's so much easier to address it in a more balanced way. And this is the same thing I see in my clients. People who have gone into a really significant state of burnout, the truth of the matter is they usually need to make significant changes in their life, up to and including, leaving their job. Um, because especially because of that second element, the mental distance, which for many people becomes a sense that where they are is so dysfunctional, and developing such a sense of cynicism or bitterness or unhappiness focused on that place, that it's going to be really difficult to recover that. So if but for people who are able to uh, well, I think kind of like you, who are able to, like you, Sabrina, able to recognize the process unfolding and then take steps with support from coworkers or from management, and take some steps as early as possible, to make sure that you do those things that activate your inner resources, that activate your resilience, that's the best way to go.
So in the ideal world, before it's too late, don't ignore the warning signs and activate our resources where we can, so that we can kind of just like build up that resilience when as
Yeah.
the challenges keep coming in, right? But ultimately, yeah, I mean, if there are, once we reach that state, it sounds like we need to make some significant changes.
By the time, the way I've begun to think about it is that, at least, is that I guess in some way I think about burnout as a thing that takes on a life of its own, kind of like depression. And once a person's in a state of burnout, just like a person who's dealing with another condition, like I think that burnout is a kind of injury, right? And if you sprained your leg or broke your leg and you had to be in a cast for 8 weeks, right? Um, you would do the things necessary to help your leg recover, and you would feel
Yeah.
right in doing that. You'd feel like, no, I can't do that. I need to take care of my leg. Or if the cast off, now I need to do PT and my leg needs to recover. But it's because of stigma, and because of how psychological issues and mental health issues are thought about, we don't think the same way about something like burnout, but we ought to do.
Mm.
We really ought to think about this as something significant that needs to be taken care of, and with the right time and energy, which means for many of us, it means taking time and energy away from something else. Um, uh, it, we can resolve it.
Yeah, I think one of the things I reflected on, right? So obviously, while I took my break and as I was coming out of it, one of the things I took away from this was that, yeah, burnout, we really need to deal, or we really need to view mental health the same way we do physical health, right? And burnout is no different from like, yeah, if you break a leg, you need to maybe get surgery, you have, a month to rest. It's kind of the same thing. Like your brain is also an organ and it falls sick. So we need to rest that up. I mean, it's not just a brain, it's like it's all connected, right?
Yes.
Because one of the things I noticed when I was burnt out, I was very stressed. I think I was mildly depressed as well. Was that my skin was, I started having like all these acne flare ups, like on my face, on like my back as well. And I was like, whoa, I haven't seen this ever. And I think it really came from that burnout. So yeah, it became physical and visible, actually. It became very visible. Um, and no matter what I did for my skin, if I drank a lot of water, it was still like, nope, Sabrina, you're stressed. Let me show you. um, and what I realized I really needed to do was just to rest. So I officially took I think 5.5 to 6 weeks off of work. And then I was like, okay, you know what? I will be back after 6 weeks. I still checked my email, like I think in between once or twice. And for anything urgent, I was still available on WhatsApp if I needed to help with like some, where's that document, Sabrina? You did not put it in the right folder, that kind of thing. So I was still some very, very minimally available. And how I spent that 6 weeks was essentially just a lot of rest. So there are many different ways I rested, but one of the key things was just sleeping. So I slept so much. I was sleeping like from 9 p.m. till 7 a.m. the next day. So I was getting 10 hours of sleep most of the nights. And I read somewhere that like, depressed means deep rest. And I was like, oh, I was getting much deep rest. And it was very important. I just knocked out. What else did I do? So thankfully my partner was also like, he's very tuned in to my mental health. And I know that sunlight and being out and moving my body helps a lot. So I was doing walks every day, out in nature, getting a bit of sunlight, eating as cleanly as I could. Although the first couple of weeks, I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna eat my chips and like fries and all that shit, chocolate, just give me all the terrible things for my body and let's feed this, burnout, depression, and yeah, it was really back down to the basics, right? Like sleep, exercise, movement, sunlight, nutrients, eating well, drinking enough water, making sure I stay away from anything unhealthy for myself. Yeah, it's really basic.
Well, also, what's really nice about hearing you describe that is the sense in which you already knew what you needed,
Yeah.
right? And that you allowed your needs to be different at different moments. So you say, okay, in this initial phase, I'm just going to give myself permission to not exercise self-control and just spoil myself for a couple of
Mm-hmm.
weeks. And then in this next phase, I've got all these things that I know are the things that I need, and I'm going to work on them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those two things, the importance of them cannot be overstated if anyone out there is dealing with this stuff already. A, rest, and figuring out ways to rest, especially if for some reason you're making time to sleep, but you're not able to sleep. This is where sleep problems become an issue. So A, being able to rest, and B, movement, right? Because that was a huge part of my recovery. And like you, my partner, my wife, was instrumental in getting me moving again. And I think at some stage after that panic attack, because she was in the taxi with me and she had never seen me, right? I'd never had one before, and she never saw me in that state before, and we've known each other for 30 plus years, right? Um, I think that really alarmed her, and she knew that I wasn't exercising, and I stopped exercising completely because I was just so afraid of being in pain. I didn't want to do anything and then end up in terrible pain again. But again, I could walk, right? And so she kind of started coaxing me to go on walks and take walks. Um, and I started taking walks and that's so unusual for her. She's usually very, laissez-faire. Like everyone does their own thing and that's fine. I'm like, I'm taking 3 months off of work. She didn't say anything about money. She was like, yes, 3 months off of work, right? Um, she was very supportive throughout the entire process and helped me place my well-being absolutely first. And then at some stage she did something she's never done before in the entirety of the time that I've known her, which was she's like, okay, we'll go to the gym together, right? Which is something she ordinarily doesn't go to the gym, right? She ordinarily does her own thing at home, but she's like, nope, if this is going to get him to the gym and he's not okay. So I think both of us benefited from having really supportive and tuned in partners.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh,
So being
yeah.
able to get support, is that what this looks like that resonates for you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think it's wow. I have been. Let me see. So, I think in July, as my burnout was manifesting itself, I was also um so I was traveling on my own. I was on my own for 3 weeks, pretty much away from my partner and away from like any social, like close social support system that know me better that way, right? So on my own for 3 weeks, I realized that I was kind of just making things worse for myself. I was not sleeping very well. I was binging on Netflix series, Apple TV as well. That was when I watched Ted Lasso, by the way, which was good, but I was doing that till 3 a.m., which was not good. And what else? Yeah, I realized that on my own when I'm weak, when I'm unwell, I kind of just allow myself to spiral, right? And it just helps so much to have at least one other person know that you're not well, and also to know how to support you when you're not doing so great. So I was lucky that I could still talk to my partner and like I'll call a couple of friends who have seen me in such a state, right? And they're like, Sabrina, are you exercising? I'm like, oh yeah, good point. What time did you sleep? Oh, so I think it really starts with having that self-awareness around what our early warning signs are, and also how to also what rest looks like for us. And it's not just sleep, right? There's so many different ways. And also on top of that, that self-care. And on a deeper level, actually, it's really about having that self-compassion for oneself, because in that state I realized that, like, oh Sabrina, why are you so weak? Why can't you just reply that email? Like all of these, like, just really critical thoughts just come to mind, and it just doesn't make things any better. So self-compassion, just being able to like say, Sabrina, what would a kind friend say to you? Or what if you were your own friend, what would you be telling yourself right now? Or if your friend was experiencing this, what would you say to them? I realized that there was like a huge double standard that I had for myself, compared to, like, if I saw a friend struggling, I'd be like, Sabrina, like, hey, just rest and take that break, and then maybe you'll come out feeling better, right? So I think, yeah, one of the things that really helped me recover, and also to maintain that recovery till today, was really attending again the mindful self-compassion course with Ben, actually. Very timely, Ben. And I would love if you could share more about mindful self-compassion, and like how this could support burnout and, I guess, general stress, right? Like dealing with life's challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's such, and I really appreciate, you know, the way that you coached yourself through that, you know, because it doesn't, and giving it time to get some traction. It doesn't, the changes, and so everyone understands the changes that Sabrina went through and the changes that I went through, it just doesn't happen like that. It doesn't happen in an hour or in a day or in a week. You need time and space and patience, right? And if you make that time and space, if you get some help and ask for help and use the support that you have available, you can get there. It's so important. And I really, really appreciate what you were saying, that you just use that most simple self-compassion tool. In fact, Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer just published a book, Self-Compassion for Burnout, which is so good. I've already designed a webinar based on the book. I'm going to offer a free webinar on this on December 22nd. So stay tuned till the end if you're interested in the webinar. But one of the first tools they recommend in the book, which again just came out like 2 months ago, is what you just mentioned, Sabrina. So your emotional intelligence there, your EQ, because even people with EQ, even resilient people, can still get burned out. In fact, we didn't mention this, but one of the risk factors for getting burned out is really caring about your job. It's a scientific, it's empirically validated risk factor. People who really care about their jobs, slightly higher risk of burning out. It makes intuitive sense. If you don't care, what do you care?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but that you did this thing, right? Where you came back to yourself and you said, hey, if I had a friend facing burnout, how would I talk to them? Because this issue about how we're talking to each other about it and how we're talking to ourselves about it really matters. Because we typically, and this is a key principle of self-compassion, we very frequently are much less supportive to ourselves and sometimes much harsher with ourselves than we are toward a good friend. And this is so key. So that your approach there was just a great place to start. In fact, one of the things that I did, again, in the spirit of, I want to share this, because at the end of the silent retreat, I wrote myself what we call a compassionate note, doing the same thing. I wrote myself a note to 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 write down what I was going to do. So I kind of put together a plan and a mental frame. I'm not going to read the whole note but again, here's how it starts. Because this is the idea, is what would I really say to someone I deeply cared about? And dear Ben, I'm here for you and I truly believe in you. More than anyone else, I know how hard the last 2 years have been for you. I know that you've been in a lot of pain, desperate to get out of it, and I really do know how hard it's been. There is a way forward. There's a way out of this, and I want to help you get on track and stay on track. It isn't going to be easy. I know you can get on track when you decide to. Here are the steps that will help you do that. And then the rest of the note goes on to list those steps. That was a really helpful thing for me. And then I would go back and read it. And we call that a self-compassionate note, you know? And for me, it's really interesting because I can really say that my self-compassion practice that I've been doing for a number of years is because at no point did I blame myself or was I harshly critical of myself. For me, one of the things was I was just overwhelmed with hopelessness. It actually, for me, was a recapitulation of something I went through as a teenager. Um, and that kind of repeated, without going into a lot of detail. It was a repeat of something that happened to me as a teenager. And I was plunged into the same mindset, which is so disconcerting since I hadn't been in that kind of mindset since I was 15 or 16. In my entire adult life, I wasn't. And so again, it just took time again. And I thank heavens for that panic attack. Otherwise, I might have kept limping along, right? Um,
Yeah.
you know, and I see there's some interesting comments now. Should we
Yeah. Yeah.
take a look at those, or do you
Yeah.
want to share a little bit more about how self-compassion was
I
helping you?
mean, I think that's just so much to share, and I also want to make space for just to take a look at the other folks, or our what our audience is saying, right? So, is there anything, Ben, you want to highlight or address as we're looking?
Well, just Hazel just wrote, being burnout and low self-confidence and self-doubt is not a good mix. Haha. Yeah, absolutely, Hazel. Absolutely. And that's that's difficult because and and being tired and worn out will cause those things to intensify. Right? In my experience in burnout was classic in the sense that I became way more negative. And I'm generally a reasonably upbeat, confident, positive person. When I was in burnout, I became this intensely negative person and constantly overreacting to things. Um, so I think at some stage, Hazel, it, you, the only person who knows how you feel is you. And you can always have confidence in that. That if you know you're feeling something, there's no one else who can know, and you're the one who knows that.
Mhm. I see a question for you, Ben, from one of our listeners on Facebook. So Lloyd asks,
Mhm.
as a clinical psychologist, how do you seek help with mental issues when you're the one that others seek help with their own? It's like you would have the burden of obligation to be there for others as the go-to person for individual help.
Yeah. So this is a great question. Thank you, Lloyd. And this was really hard for me and this is one of the things that because I felt ashamed. I felt really ashamed of this, and I can tell you in the due course of time, I had absolutely no problem talking with my close friends, with my wife, with my close friends. I had no problem talking with them and saying, "I'm not okay. I'm in trouble." And if I would visualize saying something like that to a client or a colleague, if I would visualize going to one of my colleagues here and saying, I wasn't okay, I was burned out, I would feel a sense of stigma and shame. Fortunately, I didn't opt to go for therapy because I felt like the issue wasn't that I didn't know what I needed. I knew what I needed. Again, and I prepared my own list of what I needed. I just needed to implement that. For some people, it is like going and asking for help through counseling or therapy can be a really good solution if you can't take a 6-week or a 12-week break. So then you have an hour in your week or an hour every other week when you're going in and talking with someone and having someone who can give you some guidance about how to get out of it. And there's also accountability to figure out, are you implementing the plan that you two have come up with, or are there obstacles coming up, which is part of the process, so that you two can work the obstacles through. But that was a real challenge, Lloyd, because I still have a number. I've never gone around and talked to my colleagues. This is one of the first. This is the first time I'm ever saying publicly, I got burnt out.
Yeah. Ben, thank you for sharing. And I also wanted to just thank you for sharing your self-compassionate note. I think that took a lot of courage and vulnerability to share. And I was like, whoa, Ben, wow, I have one too, but I don't know if I would read it to everyone.
Give yourself permission. Give yourself permission, Sabrina.
Yes, yes. No, and it's
Okay.
also, oh, I also have the wrong notebook with me, so it's not here. Anyway,
So it's
but
not
yeah,
even an option.
no, I don't know what I said. It was in the other notebook.
I'd like to read this to you all. It's extremely personal. Oh, darn. I don't have the right notebook. The next time.
Sorry, for part two. So please come back again. Anyway, I actually have a question for you, Ben. And we do have another one from the audience. So
Okay.
I think what I'm hearing from you, and also reflecting on my own experience, as at least for me, as I was experiencing burnout, I realized that there were some significant changes that I had to make in terms of like how I operate, and also
Mm,
burnout had kind of like brought to the surface some of my own like past traumas and memories that I was like, oh, I didn't know that part of me was still there, and I've since unpacked a lot of it through like through therapy. I found actually a new therapist to do this unpacking stuff with, um, to yeah, just to like, what was 15-year-old me doing there, and 5-year-old me, like, whoa, all these things came up when I was in that deep rest. I was also like kind of somewhat depressed and also confused because all of these things started coming up when I was resting. So Ben, can you just share like what there seems to be a fine line between burnout and depression. So what is this?
that's a really difficult question. And I think, you know, like, because if we imagine again one of those Venn diagrams, I we would see that for the circle that's the symptoms of burnout and the circle that is the symptoms of depression, there's like a 60 or 70% overlap,
Mm,
right? And in fact, for many people, kind of this kind of and I'm not using depression in the way people use it in everyday life and social media. I'm referring to clinical depression, right? Using our definition with the 12 or 15 symptoms, and a person who meets the criteria has checks off 9 out of the 12 or 9 out of the 15 or whatever it is now. Um, for a lot of people in burnout, a psychiatrist will diagnose them as having depression, because depression is a state that we reach when we feel helpless and hopeless. And many people, I mean, certainly hopelessness was a big part of how burnout manifested for me. Um, so if someone had come and said, "Oh, Ben, you know, you are depressed," I would have been like, "Well, yeah, of course I am." Right? But I think it's through the lens of burnout, which is, and maybe, I don't, you know, in the lens of burnout, which is this cumulative effect of demand and burdens that have gradually worn me down because my usual coping mechanisms weren't there, and I wasn't taking care of myself effectively. I was saying yes to too many things, and at the same time wasn't doing all of my routines that I had established for many years of movement and exercise and spiritual practice and yeah, a variety of
yeah,
things.
yeah, and I see someone on LinkedIn has shared, yeah, if you don't take the time to rest from burnout, your body will do it to you,
Yeah.
and that means your body will
Yes.
push you to get sick or super mentally ill. And yeah, it seems like, we just have to really honor the whole mind body connection, right? And how, yeah.
We need
Like
to
the
listen.
body will say, yeah, we need to listen to the body.
People, if you're having cluster headaches all the time, something's really wrong with your stomach, right? If you're having palpitations, if you're having anxiety attacks, if you're not sleeping and this is going on for a while, we need to listen because your body, for many of us, your body may be signaling you already.
Yeah.
Because again, we have
Yeah.
this remarkable capacity. We have a remarkable capacity of resilience and the ability to persevere. And many of us push on, especially the people who are diligent and conscientious. We may override our bodies, and we have this remarkable capacity to override our bodies, but it may eventually catch up with us. I also think
Mm.
there's a really good question here for Mila that I think that I'd love to hear what you think about this, Sabrina.
Oh, so the
And so
question is,
yeah.
what?
What is your advice to those who don't have a privilege to take a considerable amount of time to take a mental health break when experiencing burnout? I'd love to take a shot at that, but Sabrina, I'd love to know your thoughts first.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard because I'm putting myself in the shoe, like various shoes of people I know, right? So obviously, one, it could be you might be in the position where you could be in a role where maybe your employer doesn't allow mental health breaks or to take time off for your health. Or you might also be, in the middle of juggling various responsibilities. So I know that, especially with parents, um, and maybe folks who are millennials who are in the sandwich generation, taking care of their parents and their kids and their job, and maybe other things around them, maybe their relationship as well, other relationships. It can be really hard because it just means that you can never take a break. And I know a lot of parents who are struggling with this. So I'm in a very privileged position where I am able to take a break because I have that, I guess, freedom over my time, and I don't have the responsibility of, like, caregiving at this point in my life. But even amidst the busy schedule, leading Calm Collective, taking care of myself, doing my, all the other things I have responsibilities around, I find that it's very important for us to develop a practice around self-care, even if that looks like just taking a 5-minute break, or even a 1 hour break, right? I don't think that, like, just looking back on my various experiences around burnout, I really think that we are able to weave in those micro moments of mental health breaks throughout the day, right? So, for example, even today, to be honest, I feel a little bit under the weather. I think I got COVID 2 weeks ago, and I've been struggling. To be mentally sharp, to be physically well. I'm not able to exercise as I usually do. So, how I've been taking breaks is really through naps and allowing myself to sleep just a little bit more. A big part of my own self care is to sleep, to take a nap, to even meditate for like 10 minutes if I can, to make sure I'm drinking enough water. Because a lot of the time when I'm grumpy, it means my brain is not sufficiently watered. you know, it's like, oh, I just have to remember that, I'm so basic. I just need to water myself as I do, as I do a plant. My leaves are not, like up. It's kind of droopy. So I just gotta, pour some water. Actually, now I'm thirsty. So yeah, basic little things like that. Oh, cheers.
Cheers. Like also glass of water.
Yeah, I just making sure I'm sufficiently hydrated.
Yeah.
Mm, and also like being able to check in on my feelings. I have this feelings wheel, which Ben, I can give you one. But just asking myself, like, oh, Sabrina, how are you feeling today? Okay, let me see. I'm feeling a bit busy and stressed, or slightly pressured because I have a lot of things to be done. And I also feel a bit irritated with myself because I'm a bit behind on admin. So, so yeah, just being able to like name these feelings, like helps me just to like, okay, Sabrina, I hear you. So that's my take. But I'm so curious to hear from Ben as well.
I think this is thank you, Mila, for being here and for asking this question, because this is where the rubber hits the road, right? What is this? How do you integrate this in a busy lifestyle? So, you know, the and I think the first step is, number one, to look in the mirror and say, hey, I'm not I'm to honesty. I'm not okay. Right now, it's okay to not be okay, but to look in the mirror and say, I'm not okay and I need to do something. That's that's like step number one, right? And to start, number two, number two is to, do what I did with that note, because I didn't read you the whole note. But after that introductory paragraph, there is like 6 or 7 steps that I'm going to take. So take some time to sit down and take stock. Set a timer on your phone for 15 minutes and sit down and take stock and say, look, if I could do anything I wanted, what would I do in order to refresh myself? What would I do? I'd write down everything. What are the things that I would do? Again, so if take a vacation is on there, fine. If, go on a meditation retreat is on there, fine. But what are all the things? Like, is get more exercise on there? Is talk to friends on there? Is spend more time in nature on there? Because just start from that list. Just take 10 minutes and write down, what are all the things that I will do that nourish me, that are going to bring me back? And then stage two of the exercise, Mila, is to say to yourself, what can I start doing this week? What can I start doing, like, of these things? What could I start doing as in 5 minute or 20 minute or 1 hour increments, whatever is going to work for me? What can I start doing this week to get even just a little of that? I'm not going to allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And I'm going, because getting something's better than nothing, and I'm going to start doing this. I'm also may have to make a mindset shift. I may have to make a mindset shift from my needs don't matter to my needs, in order to sustain the caregiving I do, to take care of an older generation, to take care of a younger generation, to keep meeting work responsibilities, to be there for other people in my life. My needs also matter. My needs are not more important, but my needs need to be on an equal level. They need to have an equal priority or close to the top priority at least some of the time. And if my needs did have an equal priority, how much time would I allocate for myself? This may mean this typically, and you have to kind of, and just let that sink in. Just let that sink in, because very frequently we tell ourselves it's not possible. I can't do it. Yeah, and be patient with yourself. Be really, really patient with yourself. Don't be afraid to ask for help as well.
Yeah.
This turns out to be very important.
Yeah, I think that patience is really key. I think a lot of the time I think the way that the world works, and with the way that work works, work just gives you an X amount of days of leave, and sometimes you may be limited to, like, oh, you can only take 3 days off, and then we need you back, that kind of thing. I don't know. And we always feel very obliged to limit our rest in or in order for us to deliver on our responsibilities, right? But it doesn't work that way. Our health doesn't work that way. Life
It
doesn't work
doesn't.
that way.
It doesn't. Before we close, can we answer Soma's question?
Yeah, yeah, Ben, let's do that.
Because I think there's something really. I think there's a really important point. I hope Soma's still with us. Soma's asking,
Yeah.
what do you do if you realize you're burnt out, but feel you really can't control the factors causing
Mm.
it? Here's my answer, Soma. Talk to somebody. Talk to a friend. Talk to a coworker. Talk to trusted advisors. And maybe, if it feels right for you, talk to a counselor. But that doesn't have to be option number one. Why? Because when we're stressed, when we're in the middle of something, our psychological perspective, our field of attention narrows, and we don't see things in a clear and open way. Once have expressed something and start to talk about something, we may start to see it differently, or other people they may see something that we don't see. So that's number one, is talk about it, because maybe the narrative we have in our heads about what we can't control uh, aren't exactly, because our thoughts are real, but our thoughts are not always helpful. Our appraisals are real, but they're not always helpful. So that's that's um, that's really important. And sometimes, sometimes, one or two people have pointed out in the chat that sometimes you need to make a change. And if we do need to make a change, whether that's changing how we're allocating time, taking another hour for myself or 2 hours for myself in the course of the week, or making a bigger change. These changes feel scary. Wherever we are, we've usually ended up there because it felt comfortable for us to end up there. And it was a kind of default. Whereas sometimes when we start to ask for help, that feels scary. When we start to, acknowledge that we need help or we're not doing okay and we need that support. Sometimes if we start to say no to things, like I can't do that at this time, that'll feel scary. So we have to be able to support ourselves and empower ourselves to face that scary, that it feels scary, but maybe we'll be able to manage it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Ben, for sharing. And I know we may still have some questions coming in, and I do wonder whether maybe Ben, we can ask you the questions after this, and maybe you can just share your 2 cents, and we can
Sure.
send that out on email as well. So for folks tuning in, if you want to catch more of our sessions and all that, you can always sign up onto our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Telegram as well. So so before we wrap up, Ben, thank you so much for your wisdom today and also your personal sharing. I'm super heartened and humbled and encouraged as well. Just listening to just the honest conversation that we've had. So thank you so much. And I have a final question for you before we wrap up. And the question is, what is one thing that you hope our audience can leave with on burnout and self-compassion?
That if you notice any of these things in yourself, if you notice any of these signs, or if you realize, holy cats, I'm kind of limping along or I'm heading toward burnout, that I would hope that your response would be, wow, I'm human too. Like, all this means I'm not weak, I'm not broken. This is part of being human, right? It's not because there's something broken or flawed or defective in me.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Ben. Yeah, we're only human, and we're no one's perfect. We're even machines can break down, and they need to be restarted, and they shut down and all that. So I think we just have to treat ourselves with that kindness and compassion.
And we're not machines.
And we are also not machines. We're not human. We're human. We're not machines. I was like, we're not human. We are. Oops. I don't know. Maybe in the future, we might be a cross of both. But so thank you so much, Ben, for being with us today. I do want to invite Ben to share a bit more on his work with mindful self-compassion. So, Cloris, if you don't mind, could we share Ben's upcoming webinar? So, Ben, would you like to share a little bit about this, and then we can close
I'm
off?
really excited about this. This is just a topic that's now pretty close to my heart. Um, and I'm really excited that Chris and Kristen's book just came out on this. And I am really, there's a lot of good stuff in this book. And I'm really happy to offer a free webinar just to give people a sense of how self-compassion, and share some specific and simple tools about how self-compassion can help people deal with current burnout or early warning signs of burnout. So if you're able to, please join us and please share with other people. Everybody's welcome. That'll be on Sunday, December 22nd. And you can sign up by scanning the QR code.
Yep. So we'll just hold this for a few seconds. We'll also share this on our social media. So in case you have to rush off, we will be sharing this. Thank you so much, Ben. And I just have to attest to the power of self-compassion on overcoming burnout. I have experienced it myself. So, and then beyond the webinar, there's also the Mindful Self-Compassion course, which you can take. So I believe that will be happening next year, Ben?
Yeah, our next course is starting January 27th. If you go to my website, which is benweinstein.com, you can get all the information. And that's a beautiful journey for people who are ready to do that. It's 10 Monday evenings starting January the 27th. The registration is open now, and we have the early bird discount until the end of the year, which helps when you register and pay. You support our scholarship program. 30% of the seats in the course go to local heroes. We offer a number of seats to volunteers for Calm Collective, therapists who are supporting their communities around the region who wouldn't otherwise have access to it. So it's a remarkable opportunity to grow personally and to support communities around the region.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ben. And yeah, you deepen your roots of self-compassion, and that will help you throughout your life. I've done this twice. So I guess going to the last and final slide. Thank you everyone once again for joining us at Healing the Hustle. May everyone feel a bit better with some new insights and tips around navigating burnout with self-compassion. And yeah, you're invited to learn more about Calm Collective. We do bring some of our trainings, our workshops, talks into the workplace or the corporate environment as well. So if you want to bring us to work, we're happy to go there with you. And finally, we will have our final event of the year as Calm Collective with Calm Circles happening on Wednesday. So feel free to join us on Wednesday as we are going to be reflecting on the year. Although, of course, we still have 20 days of the year left from that day onwards. So stay connected with us on all the various platforms, and we hope to see you again soon. So happy rest of 2024 and wishing you all the best for the new year.
So much, Sabrina, and thanks everyone.
Thank you.